Ladies and gentlemen, grab a chair, lower the choir music just a little, because what was supposed to be a solemn farewell to one of America's most famous civil rights leaders somehow turned into the most polite political roast session Chicago has ever seen since the last Democratic convention. Yes, the funeral of Jesse Jackson, the legendary civil rights activist, two-time presidential candidate and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, ended up featuring something you don't normally expect at a church service. A bipartisan memorial, a bipartisan roasting grill. And at the center of the grill, the rotisserie held none other than the US President Donald Trump. Welcome to modern American politics, where even funerals occasionally come with the seasoned sarcasm and a side of political barbecue. Now, the official plan for the homecoming celebration of Jesse Jackson in Chicago sounded straightforward. Celebrate his life, celebrate his legacy, celebrate the civil rights movement, and most importantly, keep politics out of it. Jackson's son, Jesse Jackson Jr., even made a public request beforehand. Please, no political attacks, no partisan speeches, just honor the man.
Dad believed that funerals were not for the dearly departed. He believed funerals were for the living. He believed that they were great gathering meetings. And no two lives in human history will have the same number of people attending their funerals, or the same people will be at their funerals, because your friends ain't my friends ain't your friends. We don't know the same people. You don't know the same people that I know. Do not bring your politics out of respect to Reverend Jesse Jackson and the life that he lived to these homegoing services. Right. Come respectful and come to say thank you. But these homegoing services are welcome to all. Democrat, Republican, liberal, and conservative, right wing, left wing, because his life is broad enough to cover the full spectrum of what it means to be an American. We only ask people to come and be respectful in the context of the extraordinary life that he lived. Dad would have wanted us to have a great meeting to discuss our differences, to find ways of moving forward and moving together. And if his life becomes a turning point in our national political discourse, amen. Amen.
Which in hindsight was about as realistic as asking Twitter users to be calm and respectful during an election season. Because the moment the microphones were turned on, the political roasting began. The guest list alone should have warned everyone what was supposed to happen. Inside the church were some of the biggest political heavyweights of the last 3 decades. Former President Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, former Vice President Kamala Harris, civil rights veteran Sharpton, and international guests including Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa. Stay tuned, because you will see the role that Cyril had to play to cool down the tempers. Now, when you put that many seasoned politicians in one room with a microphone, keeping politics out of the conversation becomes extremely difficult, especially when the person being honored spent most of his life fighting political battles. Jackson wasn't just a pastor. He was a campaigner, a protester, a presidential candidate, a man who stood alongside Martin Luther King Jr. during civil rights movement. So, naturally, Many speakers decided the best way to honor him was to continue the same political fights he spent his life fighting. And that's exactly what happened. The moment everyone remembers from the funeral came from Barack Obama. Now, Obama didn't mention Trump by name, but the message was about as subtle as a vuvuzela at a golf tournament. He described a country waking up every day to attacks on democracy, the rule of law, and common decency. He talked about greed, bigotry, bullying, ignorance, corruption, and suddenly the church audience started clapping. Not politely, loudly. Because everyone in the room understood exactly who he was talking about, even though Obama never actually said the name. Classic political shade. Professional level. Olympic grade.
In a time when it can be hard to hope. Each day we wake up to some new assault on our democratic institutions. Another setback to the idea of the rule of law. An offense to common decency. Every day you wake up to things you just didn't think were possible. Each day we're told by those in high office to fear each other and to turn on each other, and that some Americans count more than others, and that some don't even count at all.
Then came Kamala Harris, who added her own spice. She reminded everyone that she had predicted much of the political chaos currently happening in America. And while she insisted she wasn't saying, "I told you so," the entire sentence basically translated into, "I warned you." It was the most polite "I told you so" ever delivered at a funeral podium.
So let me just say, I predicted a lot about what's happening right now. I'm not into saying "I told you so," but we did see it coming. But what I did not predict is that we would not have Jesse Jackson with us right now to help us get through this. And so from a young age, we know that Reverend Jackson saw that the doors had been closed to the millions of people across our nation and throughout the world who were otherwise so deserving. And they were doors, of course, to opportunity, to equity, to justice, to freedom. And so he dedicated his life, as we all know, to breaking down those barriers. So when we are speaking of these doors, I will share with you that as a child, I was raised that when you see a closed door, you must knock and wait to be invited in. What life has taught me is that if that invitation is not offered, and if that door remains shut, even after repeated attempts to knock on said door, sometimes you have no choice but just to kick that door open. Reverend Jackson was impatient. He did not waste time waiting. Even when the doors in front of him were barred and bolted, even if those on the other side hesitated or even ignored him, he always devised a way through.
Then Joe Biden stepped up. At 83 years old, the man kept it short and simple. America, he said, was in a tough spot, and the current administration did not share the same values. Translation again, Trump. The crowd understood. The applause came again.
My prayer for everyone here, and I'm cutting my speech very short because I'm afraid I'm going to be attacked. So, folks, I guess I could say it all in one paragraph. Don't give up. I started off every morning as a young man when I got back to Delaware. Every morning, because I got involved in my community, I quit my job with one of the biggest law firms in Delaware, became a public defender. And I spent a lot of time with the community. I was the only white guy who worked on the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. Matter of fact, they named the biggest swimming pool after me, the Biden swimming pool, man. But all kidding aside, I was one of only 13 lifeguards. I was the only white guy. Because I wanted to understand. I thought I knew the issues, but didn't understand the individuals, persons. I remember I had a little Chevette. I remember an all-state halfback I played with. And he said, "Joe, you have a jerry can? You know, a big 5-gallon. He said, "Can I borrow your car?" I said, "You got a car? Sure, you can borrow. What do you need a jerry can for?" He said, "You dumb SOB. I'm going down to see my mother in North Carolina. I can't stop at a gas station. I can't stop at a gas station." The point I'm making is, the more we know one another, the more we understand what we're going through. There's enough decency and human nature in this country to reach out, to help. You know, Jesse kept hope alive for us in his lifetime. And we've got to continue to do it in our lifetime for our children, because there's nothing beyond our capacity when we work together. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So stand up and finish this job.
And then Reverend Al Sharpton decided satility was overrated. "We have beaten people bigger than Trump before," he said, which triggered cheers, because if Obama's speech was a carefully aimed dart, Sharpton's was a brick through the window.
4 minutes, which means 8 in Jacksonian language. I don't want us, Yusef, to leave here having mourned and then mock what Jackson was all about. We're sitting here acting like our own lack of rising to what he wanted us to be is the reason we are sitting on the brink of some of the most serious Reconstruction behavior being rescinded that we've seen in modern times. To leave here and not follow an assignment would not be what Jesse Jackson taught us. To make us feel good, we went to Jesse Jackson's funeral, and that we said nice things about Mrs. Jackson, but people at the same time are killing illegal immigrants. People at the same time are cutting public funding. At the same time, Affordable Care Act is not being renewed and seniors have to deal with premiums. Don't sit here so holy and sanctified and act like you have no assignment yourself.
Now, critics immediately jumped online accusing Democrats of hijacking a funeral for politics. Conservative commentators started saying the event was disrespectful, partisan, classless, but supporters had a simple response. This is exactly what Jesse Jackson's life represented. Jackson, was never neutral. He was never quiet. He was never political. He ran for president in 1984 and in 1988. He challenged the political establishment. He helped pave the way for the rise of Barack Obama. Indeed, when Barack Obama was inaugurated as a president, Reverend Jesse Jackson shed his tears. His famous slogan, "Keep hope alive," wasn't just spiritual. It was political. So many supporters argued that sanitizing the funeral would have been dishonest because Jackson himself used every public stage available to push political causes, which means the speeches weren't really turning the funeral political. They were continuing his legacy. Meanwhile, Ramaphosa played it like a diplomat. Interestingly, the one person who refused to join the roasting session was South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa traveled over 9,000 miles to attend the ceremony, and his speech focused entirely on Jackson's global legacy. He talked about Jackson's role in the anti-apartheid movement, his support for Nelson Mandela, his push for US sanctions against apartheid South Africa, and his influence on global justice movements. No political attacks, even though his speech was still political. No jokes, just a tribute, which made his speech stand out as the calmest moment in a very politically charged room.
Program Director, I heard you say that if you are not a Jackson, you can only speak for 2 minutes. But I have traveled 14,000 kilometers. Which is 9,000 miles over 24 hours. And Jesse Jackson's story and relationship with South Africa can never be told in 2 minutes. So indulge me in my 30 minutes. I will tell the story.
Within minutes of the funeral ending, social media exploded. Clips of Obama's speech went viral. Memes started circulating. Commentators debated whether the funeral had been respectful or whether it had turned into a political rally. Supporters said the speeches were truthful and powerful. Critics said the event had been turned into a partisan circus. But one thing was clear. The moment perfectly captured the personality of Jesse Jackson, a man whose entire life sat at the intersection of faith, activism, and politics. A man who never avoided confrontation. A man who probably would have enjoyed the entire debate happening afterward. Now, let's be honest. If your funeral ends up triggering a national political argument, if former presidents are throwing shade from the podium, if the internet turns your memorial into trending memes, then you probably lived a life that actually mattered. And that, in many ways, is the most Jesse Jackson ending imaginable. A farewell filled with faith, filled with politics, and just enough roasting to keep the conversation alive. Because in the end, the man who told America to keep hope alive also understood something else about politics. Sometimes hope comes with a little sarcasm. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to subscribe, share, and let us know what you think about this in the comments section. Bye-bye.